The dust storm came without warning on that scorching August afternoon in 1882, turning the Montana sky the color of dried blood as Olivia Harper clutched her swollen belly and stumbled toward the first building she could find in Miles City. Her husband had been dead for 3 weeks, shot during a dispute over a card game in Billings, and she had been walking ever since, her boots worn through at the heels, her cotton dress stained with the grime of the trail. She pushed open the door to the Miles City Hotel, nearly collapsing against the wooden counter where a man with slicked hair and a pencil mustache looked up from his ledger with narrowed eyes. "Please," Olivia said, her voice cracking from thirst and exhaustion. "I need a room, just for tonight. I can work for it, clean or cook or anything you need." The hotel clerk looked her up and down, his gaze lingering on her pregnant belly with obvious distaste. "We do not take in women in your condition without proper payment up front. $5 for the night." "I do not have $5, Olivia said, tears burning her eyes. "My husband died. I have been walking for days. Please, sir, I just need somewhere safe to rest." "Then you need to keep walking," the clerk said, turning back to his ledger as though she had ceased to exist. "This is a respectable establishment." Olivia wanted to argue that she was respectable too, that she had been married properly in a church, that her husband's death was not her fault, but the words died in her throat. She stumbled back out into the dust storm, covering her face with her torn shawl as the wind whipped around her. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, as if protesting the conditions it would soon be born into. She tried the boarding house next, where a woman with gray hair pulled back in a severe bun answered the door. Olivia barely got through her request before the woman was shaking her head. "I cannot have an unmarried woman giving birth under my roof," the woman said firmly. "What would the other boarders think? This is a Christian household." "I was married," Olivia protested, but the door had already closed in her face. The general store, the saloon, even the church, every door she knocked on brought the same response. Some people were kind in their refusal, others were harsh, but the answer was always no. The sun was beginning to set, the dust storm finally clearing, when Olivia found herself at the edge of town, sitting on a wooden crate outside the livery stable, wondering if she would die here on this street with her unborn child. She put her hand on her belly, feeling the baby moving inside her, and whispered, "I am sorry. I am so sorry I could not do better for you." "Madam." A deep voice startled her, and she looked up to see a man standing a few feet away, his silhouette backlit by the orange glow of the setting sun. As he stepped closer, she could make out his features. A strong jaw darkened with stubble brown eyes that held genuine concern, and a black cowboy hat pushed back on his head. He looked to be in his late 20s, with sun-weathered skin and the lean, muscular build of someone who worked hard for a living. "Are you all right?" "I am fine," Olivia lied automatically, but her body betrayed her as another wave of exhaustion made her sway on the crate. The cowboy moved quickly, steadying her with a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You do not look fine, if you will pardon me saying so. When did you last eat?" Olivia tried to remember. "Yesterday morning, I think, or maybe the day before." The cowboy's jaw tightened. "Stay right here." He disappeared into the livery stable and emerged a moment later with a canteen, which he pressed into her hands. "Drink slowly." The water was cool and clean, and Olivia had to force herself not to gulp it down too quickly. When she finally lowered the canteen, she found the cowboy watching her with a mixture of concern and something that looked like anger, though she sensed it was not directed at her. "Thank you," she said softly. "You are very kind." "My name is Benjamin Foster," he said, crouching down so they were at eye level. "Most folks call me Ben. What is your name?" "Olivia Harper." She hesitated, then added, "I am a widow. My husband died 3 weeks ago." Ben's expression softened. "I am sorry for your loss." "Do you have family in Miles City?" Olivia shook her head. "I do not have family anywhere. It was just my husband and me, and now it is just me and the baby." She looked down at her belly. "I have been trying to find a place to stay, but no one will take me in. I have no money and I am pregnant, and I suppose that makes me a burden no one wants to bear." Ben was quiet for a long moment, and Olivia braced herself for him to make his excuses and leave, like everyone else had. Instead, he stood up and held out his hand to her. "My home is yours now," he said simply. Olivia stared at him, certain she had misheard. "What?" "I have a small ranch about 3 miles outside of town. It is not much, just a cabin and some land where I raise horses, but it is clean and dry and there is food. You and your baby need a safe place, and I am offering you one." His brown eyes met hers steadily. "No strings attached. You can stay as long as you need." "But you do not even know me," Olivia whispered, afraid to believe this was real. "I know you are a person in need, and I know I have the means to help you. That is all I need to know." Ben kept his hand extended. "What do you say?" Olivia looked at his hand, calloused and strong, and then at his face, trying to find any hint of ulterior motive. But all she saw was honest concern and a quiet determination. She thought of her baby, of the cold night ahead, of the doors that had been slammed in her face. She did not have the luxury of pride anymore. She placed her hand in his, and he helped her to her feet. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking. "Thank you so much." Ben just nodded and led her to where his horse was tied outside the stable, a sturdy gray mare with kind eyes. "Her name is Clementine," he said. "She is gentle. I am going to help you up, and then we will ride out to the ranch." "Is that all right?" Olivia nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Ben lifted her onto the saddle with surprising gentleness, mindful of her pregnant belly, and then swung up behind her. His arms came around her to hold the reins, creating a protective circle that made her feel safe for the first time in weeks. As they rode out of Miles City into the vast Montana landscape, the sky painted pink and gold by the dying sun, Olivia felt the baby kick again. This time it did not feel like a protest, but more like a small gesture of hope. The ranch was indeed small, as Ben had warned, but to Olivia it looked like paradise. The cabin was built from sturdy logs with a stone chimney, and there was a barn for the horses and a chicken coop that she could hear clucking softly in the twilight. A creek ran nearby, its water glinting in the fading light. Ben helped her down from the horse and led her inside the cabin. It was a single large room with a fireplace, a bed in one corner, a small kitchen area with a stove and table, and some simple furniture. Everything was neat and well maintained, though clearly the home of a man who lived alone. "You can have the bed," Ben said, already moving to start a fire in the fireplace. "I will sleep out in the barn. There is plenty of room in the hayloft, and I have been meaning to fix some of the equipment out there anyway." "I cannot take your bed," Olivia protested. "This is your home." "And I told you it is yours now too," Ben said firmly, striking a match and holding it to the kindling. "You are pregnant and exhausted. You need proper rest. I will not hear any arguments about it." Olivia sank into one of the wooden chairs at the table, suddenly too tired to protest further. She watched as Ben moved around the cabin with easy efficiency, building up the fire and then setting a pot of water to boil on the stove. He pulled out a loaf of bread, some dried meat, and a jar of preserves, assembling a simple meal that made Olivia's mouth water. "I am not much of a cook," he said apologetically as he set the food in front of her, "but it will fill your belly." Olivia ate slowly, savoring every bite, while Ben sat across from her with his own plate. She noticed he gave her larger portions, and when she tried to protest, he just shook his head. "I ate in town earlier," he lied, and she knew it was a lie, but she was too hungry and too grateful to call him on it. After the meal, Ben heated water for her to wash with and tactfully stepped outside while she cleaned herself up as best she could. When he came back in, she was sitting on the edge of the bed, trying not to cry from sheer relief at being clean and fed and safe. "The nightshirt on the bed is clean," Ben said, carefully not looking directly at her. "It will be big on you, but it is better than sleeping in your traveling clothes. I will be in the barn if you need anything. Just call out." "Ben," Olivia said, her voice thick with emotion. "Why are you doing this? You do not know me. For all you know, I could be a terrible person." Ben finally met her eyes, and there was something in his expression that made her breath catch. "My mother was a widow once when my father died in a mining accident. She was alone with 3 young children, and people turned her away just like they turned you away today. We nearly starved before she found work as a seamstress. I swore then that if I ever had the means to help someone in her position, I would do it." He paused, then added quietly, "And you do not seem like a terrible person to me. You seem like someone who has had some terrible luck." He left before she could respond, closing the door gently behind him. Olivia changed into the nightshirt, which smelled like soap and sunshine, and climbed into the bed. The mattress was filled with corn husks and feathers, and it was the most comfortable thing she had felt in weeks. She pressed her face into the pillow and finally let herself cry, releasing all the fear and grief and exhaustion she had been holding inside. But they were not just tears of sorrow. They were also tears of relief and gratitude, and maybe, just maybe, the first tentative stirrings of hope. The next morning, Olivia woke to sunlight streaming through the cabin window and the smell of coffee brewing. She sat up slowly, her body aching from weeks of hard travel, and found a simple gray dress laid out on the chair near the bed. It was well worn but clean, and when she held it up, she saw that someone had let out the seams to accommodate a pregnant belly. She dressed quickly and stepped outside to find Ben feeding the chickens, his movements efficient and practiced. When he saw her, he straightened up and touched the brim of his hat in greeting. "Good morning," he said. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in a long time," Olivia admitted. "Thank you for the dress." Ben looked almost embarrassed. "It was my mother's. She passed 2 years ago and I kept some of her things. I altered it last night. I am not much of a seamstress, but I figured it would be more comfortable than what you were wearing." Olivia was touched beyond words. This man, this stranger, had spent his night in a barn altering a dress for her comfort. "It is perfect," she said softly. "There is coffee and biscuits inside," Ben said, turning back to the chickens. "Help yourself to whatever you need. I have some work to do around the ranch today, but you should rest. You have been through a lot." Over the next few days, a routine developed. Ben worked on the ranch, tending to his horses and fixing things that needed repair, while Olivia slowly regained her strength. He was unfailingly kind and respectful, always making sure she had enough to eat, always keeping a respectful distance. They ate their meals together, and during those times, they began to talk. Olivia learned that Ben had grown up in Wyoming, the son of a miner and a seamstress. His father had died when he was 12, and he had worked odd jobs to help support his mother and 2 younger sisters until he was old enough to strike out on his own. He had come to Montana 5 years ago, working as a ranch hand until he had saved enough money to buy this small piece of land and start breeding horses. "It is not much," he said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, "but it is mine. I like the independence of it, making my own way." "It is a good life," Olivia said, and she meant it. There was something peaceful about the ranch, something honest and real that she had never experienced in the more civilized places she had lived. She told him about her own life, growing up in Missouri as the daughter of a shopkeeper. She had married Thomas Harper when she was 20, attracted by his charm and his promises of adventure. They had moved from town to town as Thomas chased various schemes and opportunities, never quite finding success. When she discovered she was pregnant, she had been happy, thinking it would settle Thomas down. Instead, it had seemed to make him more reckless. "He was not a bad man," Olivia said quietly. "Just a restless one. He could not seem to be content with what he had. He always thought the next card game, the next business venture, the next town would be the one where everything came together." She touched her belly. "When he died, I had nothing. He had spent everything we had, and I was too proud to write to my parents and beg for help. They did not approve of Thomas, and I suppose they were right not to." "You should not have to beg your own parents for help," Ben said, his voice hard. "And being wrong about your husband does not mean you deserve to suffer." Olivia looked at him, this man who had shown her more kindness in a few days than most people had shown her in a lifetime. "Why are you not married?" she asked, then immediately felt her face heat. "I am sorry. That is too personal." But Ben just smiled slightly. "It is all right. The truth is, I never found the right woman. Most women in these parts want a man with more to offer than a small horse ranch. They want security, a nice house in town, that sort of thing. And the ones who might have been interested, well, I never felt that connection with them. My mother used to say I was too particular." "I think being particular is better than settling," Olivia said. "So do I," Ben agreed. As the days turned into weeks, Olivia found herself growing stronger, both physically and emotionally. She helped around the ranch as much as her pregnancy would allow, collecting eggs from the chickens, helping to prepare meals, mending Ben's worn clothes. She insisted on contributing, refusing to be a complete burden, and Ben accepted her help with good grace. They fell into an easy companionship that surprised both of them. Ben would tell her stories about the horses he was training, pointing out their individual personalities and quirks. Olivia would read to him in the evenings from the small collection of books he kept, her voice filling the cabin with stories of far-off places and grand adventures. One afternoon, about a month after her arrival, Olivia was hanging laundry on the line behind the cabin when she felt a sharp pain in her lower back. She gasped and grabbed onto the clothesline for support, breathing through the discomfort. When it passed, she tried to continue her work, but another pain came a few minutes later, stronger this time. "Ben," she called out, trying to keep the panic from her voice. He appeared almost instantly, running from the barn where he had been working. "What is wrong?" "I think it might be the baby," Olivia said, another contraction making her double over. "But it is too early. I have another 6 weeks at least." Ben's face went pale, but his voice remained steady. "Come on, let us get you inside." He helped her into the cabin and onto the bed, then stood there looking uncertain for the first time since she had known him. "I should get the doctor from town, but that is a 6-mile round trip, and I do not want to leave you alone." "The Johnsons," Olivia said, remembering Ben mentioning his neighbors. "They are only a mile away, are they not? Mrs. Johnson might be able to help." Ben nodded decisively. "I will ride there now. I will be back as quickly as I can. Will you be all right?" Olivia tried to smile despite another contraction. "I will have to be." Ben rode Clementine harder than he ever had, reaching the Johnson ranch in record time. Martha Johnson, a weathered woman in her 50s who had raised 7 children of her own, did not hesitate. She grabbed her bag of supplies and rode back with Ben, her husband Frank following behind to fetch the doctor just in case. By the time they got back to the cabin, Olivia's contractions were coming regularly, and Martha took charge with the calm efficiency of someone who had done this many times before. She shooed Ben out of the cabin, telling him to make himself useful by boiling water and preparing clean linens. The labor lasted through the night and into the next morning. Ben paced outside the cabin, listening to Olivia's cries and feeling utterly helpless. He prayed more than he had in years, bargaining with God to keep her and the baby safe. Finally, as the sun was rising on a new day, he heard the thin, strong wail of a newborn baby. A few minutes later, Martha opened the cabin door, her face tired but smiling. "You have a healthy baby boy," she said, "and the mother is doing well, all things considered. The baby is small from coming early, but he has good lungs and a strong will. I think he is going to be just fine." Ben felt his knees go weak with relief. "Can I see them? Give us a few minutes to get cleaned up and then yes." When he was finally allowed in, he found Olivia propped up in the bed, looking exhausted but radiant. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket, and when he approached, she pulled the blanket back so he could see the baby's face. The little boy had a shock of dark hair and a tiny, perfect face. His eyes were closed, and his small fist was pressed against his mouth. Ben felt something shift in his chest, an overwhelming surge of protectiveness and tenderness that nearly brought him to his knees. "He is beautiful," Ben said, his voice rough with emotion. "Would you like to hold him?" Olivia asked softly. Ben nodded, not trusting himself to speak, and carefully took the baby into his arms. The infant was so small, so fragile, but Ben could feel the steady beat of his heart, the warmth of his tiny body. He looked down at the baby's face and then up at Olivia, and something passed between them, something profound and unspoken. "What will you name him?" Ben asked. Olivia was quiet for a moment, then said, "Samuel, after my father, Samuel Benjamin Harper." She met Ben's eyes. "If that is all right with you." Ben felt his throat tighten. "You want to give him my name? You saved our lives," Olivia said simply. "You gave us a home when no one else would. You have been kinder to me than I had any right to expect. I want my son to have a name that reminds him of the man who showed us what true goodness looks like." Ben had to turn away for a moment to compose himself. When he looked back, he said, "I would be honored." Martha stayed for a few days to help Olivia recover and to make sure the baby was thriving. She brought baby clothes and blankets that her own children had outgrown, and she taught Ben how to change diapers and swaddle the infant properly. Before she left, she pulled Ben aside. "That is a good woman in there," Martha said, nodding toward the cabin. "And you are a good man. I have eyes, Ben Foster, and I can see the way you look at her. Do not let propriety or fear stop you from pursuing something that could make you both happy." Ben felt his face heat. "She just lost her husband. She is vulnerable right now. I would not take advantage of that." "I am not suggesting you take advantage," Martha said with some exasperation. "I am suggesting that when the time is right, when she has had time to heal, you let her know how you feel. Life is short, Ben. Too short to waste time pretending we do not care about people when we do." After Martha left, the cabin felt very quiet with just the three of them. Ben continued to sleep in the barn, though he found himself spending more and more time in the cabin, helping with the baby and simply enjoying Olivia's company. Little Samuel was a good baby, fussy only when he was hungry or needed changing, and Ben was surprised by how quickly he adapted to having an infant in his life. He found himself offering to hold Samuel while Olivia ate or rested, rocking the baby and humming old songs his mother used to sing. He built a cradle from pine wood, carving small horses into the sides, and Olivia cried when she saw it. "You have done so much for us," she said, wiping her eyes. "I do not know how I will ever repay you." You do not need to repay me, Ben said. I am just glad I can help. But the truth he barely admitted to himself, was that it had stopped being about helping weeks ago. Somewhere along the way, Olivia and Samuel had stopped being his charity case and had become his family. He loved waking up and seeing smoke from the cabin chimney, loved coming in for meals and finding Olivia at the stove, loved the sound of her laughter and the way she hummed while she worked. He loved her. He was in love with Olivia Harper, and he had no idea what to do about it. The autumn came to Montana with a burst of gold and red in the cottonwood trees along the creek. Samuel grew stronger and more alert, his tiny features becoming more defined. He had Olivia's blue eyes and what appeared to be his late father's dark hair, and he was starting to smile when he saw familiar faces. One evening in late September, after Samuel had been put down to sleep in his cradle, Olivia and Ben sat on the porch as they often did, watching the stars come out. The air was getting cooler, carrying the promise of winter, and Ben knew he needed to start making preparations for the cold months ahead. I was thinking, Olivia said hesitantly, breaking the comfortable silence. I should start looking for work in town, maybe as a seamstress or a cook. I cannot stay here forever living off your charity. Ben felt his heart clench. You are not living off my charity. You work hard around here. You have made this place feel like a real home. That is kind of you to say, Olivia said. But we both know I need to find a way to support myself and Samuel. You have done more than enough. What if I do not want you to leave? The words were out before Ben could stop them, and he felt his pulse quicken with a mixture of fear and hope. Olivia turned to look at him, her blue eyes wide in the starlight. What do you mean? Ben took a deep breath, gathering his courage. I mean that I have gotten used to having you here, both of you. This place was just a house before, but now it feels like a home. You and Samuel, you make everything better, brighter. He paused, then plunged ahead. I know it has not been that long since your husband passed. I know you probably are not ready for this, but I am in love with you, Olivia. I have been for weeks now, maybe longer. And I love Samuel too, like he was my own son. Olivia's hand went to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. I am not asking you to feel the same way, Ben said quickly. I just needed you to know, if you want to move to town, I will help you find a place and get settled. But if you wanted to stay here, to build a life here with me, I would spend every day making sure you never regretted it. Ben, Olivia whispered, and then she was crying, tears streaming down her face. Ben felt his heart sink. I am sorry. I should not have said anything. Please do not cry. But Olivia was shaking her head, reaching out to take his hand. I am crying because I am happy, you foolish man. I am crying because I have been falling in love with you too, and I was terrified to admit it. I thought it made me a terrible person to have feelings for someone else so soon after Thomas died. Ben squeezed her hand, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. You have feelings for me. Of course I do, Olivia said, laughing through her tears. How could I not? You have been so good to me, so patient and kind. You make me feel safe and valued in a way I have never felt before. When I think about leaving here, about taking Samuel and moving to some boarding house in town, my heart breaks. This is home. You are home. Ben moved closer, cupping her face gently in his calloused hands. Can I kiss you, please? Olivia whispered. Their first kiss was soft and tentative, both of them almost afraid to believe this was real. But then Olivia's arms came around his neck and Ben pulled her closer, and the kiss deepened into something more certain, more real. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard, and Ben rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, he said. I know it is soon, and we can wait if you need to, but marry me, Olivia. Let me be your husband and Samuel's father. Let me spend the rest of my life taking care of you both." "Yes," Olivia said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." They were married in early October in the small church in Miles City, the same church that had turned Olivia away months before. Martha Johnson stood as witness, along with her husband Frank, and several of Ben's friends from town. Olivia wore a simple white dress that Martha had helped her sew, with wildflowers in her hair, and Ben wore his best suit, which he had bought specially for the occasion. Samuel, now 2 months old, slept peacefully in Martha's arms during the ceremony, only waking to gurgle happily when the preacher pronounced Ben and Olivia husband and wife. As Ben kissed his bride, he felt a sense of rightness settle over him, a certainty that this was exactly where he was meant to be. The wedding celebration was small but joyful, held at the ranch with neighbors and friends bringing food and music. As the sun set and people began to head home, Ben and Olivia stood together in the doorway of their cabin, watching the last wagon disappear down the road. "Mrs. Foster," Ben said, trying out the name. Olivia smiled up at him. "Mr. Foster." "I like the sound of that," Ben said, pulling her close. "So do I," Olivia agreed, then added with a mischievous glint in her eye, "though I suspect I will always think of myself as the woman who was refused shelter everywhere until a cowboy said his home was mine." "And now it truly is yours," Ben said. "Everything I have, everything I am, it is all yours." That night, after they had put Samuel down to sleep and banked the fire, they came together as husband and wife for the first time. Ben was gentle and patient, mindful of the fact that Olivia's body was still recovering from childbirth. But there was passion too, a deep connection that went beyond the physical, a sense of two souls finally finding their missing piece. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the bed that had once been his alone, Olivia traced lazy circles on Ben's chest and said, "I never thought I could be this happy. After Thomas died, after all those doors closed in my face, I thought my life was over, but you gave me a new beginning." "We gave each other a new beginning," Ben corrected, kissing the top of her head. "I was just going through the motions before you came along, working and eating and sleeping, but not really living. You and Samuel, you made me want to build something, to dream again." The first year of their marriage passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. Samuel grew from a tiny infant into a sturdy toddler with his mother's blue eyes and an infectious laugh. He took his first steps holding on to Ben's hands, and his first word was "Papa," which made Ben cry and made Olivia cry because Ben was crying. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts. Olivia proved to have a natural way with the horses, and she started helping Ben train them. Her gentle touch and patient manner worked wonders with even the most skittish animals. They expanded the barn and built a proper chicken coop, and Olivia started a vegetable garden that yielded more produce than they could eat, allowing them to sell the surplus in town. In the spring of 1884, Olivia discovered she was pregnant again. Unlike her first pregnancy, this one was filled with joy and anticipation rather than fear and uncertainty. Ben fussed over her constantly, insisting she rest more and do less heavy work, until Olivia finally had to sit him down and remind him that women had been having babies since the beginning of time. "I know that," Ben said, looking sheepish, "but you are not just any woman. You are my woman, and I want to make sure you and the baby are safe." "We will be safe because we have you," Olivia assured him, kissing him softly. "And because we have a real home and plenty to eat and a husband who loves us more than life itself." Their daughter was born on a crisp November morning, arriving much more easily than Samuel had. She was a tiny thing with wispy blonde hair and Ben's brown eyes, and they named her Rose after Ben's mother. Samuel, now 2 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister, constantly wanting to hold her and touch her tiny hands. Gentle, Ben would remind him, helping the toddler cradle his sister. She is very small. My baby, Samuel would say proudly, and Olivia and Ben would exchange amused glances over his head. Life settled into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. Mornings began with Olivia nursing Rose while Ben made breakfast and Samuel played with his wooden horses. Days were filled with ranch work and caring for the children, with stolen kisses in the barn and quiet conversations during the children's afternoon naps. Evenings meant family meals around the table Ben had built with his own hands, and then story time before bed, with Samuel snuggled against his father's side and Rose sleeping in her mother's arms. One evening, when Rose was about 6 months old, Martha Johnson came to visit and found Olivia in the garden, harvesting the last of the late summer vegetables. Samuel was helping, more hindrance than help really, while Rose napped in a basket in the shade. "Look at you," Martha said with satisfaction, "thriving like a wildflower after rain." Olivia laughed, pushing a strand of hair out of her face. "I certainly feel like I've taken root here." "That man of yours still treats you like you are made of spun glass," Martha observed. "I saw him watching you from the barn, making sure you do not overexert yourself." "He worries too much," Olivia said, but her tone was fond. "Though I confess I do not mind it. It is nice to be cherished." "You deserve it, child. You both do." Martha picked a ripe tomato and took a bite. "You know, folks in town still talk about you sometimes, about how Ben took you in when you were desperate and how you made a real family together. Some of them feel guilty, I think, for turning you away that day." "They should not feel guilty," Olivia said, though her voice held a note of steel. "What happened brought me exactly where I needed to be. If anyone had taken me in that day, I would never have met Ben. I would never have known what real love feels like." "That is a generous way to look at it," Martha said. "It is the only way to look at it," Olivia replied. "I could spend the rest of my life being angry at the people who refused to help me, or I can be grateful for the one person who did. I choose gratitude." As if summoned by their conversation, Ben appeared, wiping his hands on his work pants. "Ladies," he said, nodding to Martha before his eyes found Olivia. "Almost done here. Dinner is ready." "Almost," Olivia said, standing with Samuel's help and brushing dirt from her skirt. "Martha, will you stay and eat with us?" "I would love to, but Frank is expecting me home. I just wanted to drop off some preserves I made." She handed Olivia a basket containing several jars. "Blackberry. I know how Ben loves them." After Martha left, the family gathered for dinner, Samuel chattering about everything and nothing while Rose gummed happily on a piece of bread. Ben looked around the table at his family, at the woman who had become the center of his world and the children who filled his heart to bursting, and felt a wave of contentment so strong it was almost overwhelming. "What are you thinking about?" Olivia asked, noticing his expression. "Just that I am the luckiest man alive," Ben said simply. Later that night, after the children were asleep and they lay together in the darkness, Olivia said, "I have been thinking about something." "What is that?" Ben asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her arm. "I want Samuel to know the truth about Thomas, about his real father." She felt Ben tense beside her and quickly continued. "Not yet, he is too young to understand. But when he is older, I think he should know that Thomas existed, that he was his father by blood. But I also want him to know that you are his father in every way that matters." Ben was quiet for a long moment, then said, "I think that is right. He should know where he comes from. But Olivia, I want you to know that I have never thought of him as anything but my son. From the moment I held him in my arms, he was mine." "I know," Olivia said, emotion thick in her voice. That is why I love you so much. You have such a good heart, Benjamin Foster. You bring out the best in me, Ben replied, pulling her closer. You always have. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. The ranch expanded as Ben's reputation for breeding quality horses spread throughout Montana. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, with enough money to put by for the future and to help neighbors when times were hard. Samuel grew into a thoughtful boy with a love for animals and a talent for drawing. He would spend hours sketching the horses and the landscape, and Olivia carefully saved every picture, creating a collection that documented their life together. When he was 7, Ben sat him down and gently explained about Thomas, about how his first father had died before he was born. "But Papa Ben is my real papa," Samuel said firmly, and Ben had to swallow hard against the lump in his throat. "That is right," he managed to say. "I am your real papa and I always will be." Rose was a wild child, fearless and full of energy, always climbing things she should not climb and exploring places she should not go. She had been wrapped around her little finger and knew it, though Olivia made sure she still minded her manners and did her chores. In 1888, their second son was born, a robust baby they named James after Ben's father. Samuel was thrilled to have a brother, and Rose was indignant that the baby was not a girl, though she eventually came around and appointed herself his protector. The cabin had been expanded twice now to accommodate their growing family, with 2 additional rooms built onto the original structure. There was talk of eventually building a proper house, but neither Ben nor Olivia felt any urgency about it. The cabin held too many happy memories, had been witness to too much love to abandon it. One summer afternoon in 1890, when Samuel was 8, Rose was 6, and James was 2, a fancy carriage pulled up to the ranch. A well-dressed couple emerged, and Olivia recognized them with a start as her parents, whom she had not seen or spoken to since before Thomas died. "Olivia," her mother said, her voice trembling as she took in her daughter standing in the doorway of the cabin, a toddler on her hip and dirt under her fingernails. "We heard you were here. We have been looking for you." "It has been 8 years, Olivia said, her voice cool. "Why now?" Her father stepped forward, his hat in his hands. "We heard about Thomas, about what happened, and we heard that you have remarried and have children. We wanted to make amends if you will let us." Ben appeared at Olivia's side, his presence solid and reassuring. "I think this is a conversation we should have inside," he said quietly. Over coffee at the kitchen table, while the children played outside under Samuel's watchful eye, Olivia's parents explained that they had tried to find her after hearing about Thomas's death, but by the time they traced her to Miles City, she had disappeared. They had assumed the worst until a business associate mentioned seeing a woman matching her description at the Foster Ranch. "We were wrong," Olivia's mother said, tears streaming down her face. "We were wrong to disapprove of your marriage to Thomas, wrong to cut you off, wrong about everything. When we thought you might be dead, we realized what fools we had been. Please, Olivia, can you forgive us?" Olivia looked at Ben, who gave her an encouraging nod. She thought about holding on to her anger, about punishing them for the years they had missed, for not being there when she needed them most. But then she thought about the life she had built, the family she had created, and realized that forgiveness was not about them. It was about her, about not letting old hurt poison her happiness. "I forgive you," she said finally, "but you need to understand something. I am not the girl you remember. That girl died on the streets of Miles City when no one would help her. The woman I am now was built by the man sitting beside me, by the children playing outside, by the life we have created together. If you want to be part of our lives, you are welcome. But you need to accept all of it, except that I am a rancher's wife and happy to be one." Her parents nodded eagerly, and over the following years, they became regular visitors to the ranch. They doted on their grandchildren and developed a deep respect for Ben, who had given their daughter the life and love they had failed to provide. Olivia's mother taught Rose to sew, and her father taught Samuel about business and numbers, skills that would serve him well in the future. In 1893, their youngest child was born, another daughter they named Martha after the woman who had helped deliver Samuel and who had become like a second mother to Olivia. The birth was easy, and Martha Johnson, now in her 60s, cried when she learned the baby's namesake. "You have given this old woman more joy than you know," she said, cradling the infant. "Watching you build this family, watching you and Ben love each other so well, it has been one of the great pleasures of my life." By the time their 20th wedding anniversary arrived in 1895, Ben and Olivia had created something truly remarkable. The ranch was now one of the most successful in the region, and their children were growing into fine young people. Samuel, at 13, was already helping his father with the horse training and showing real talent for it. Rose, at 11, was a force of nature who could outride and outrope most of the ranch hands they occasionally hired for big jobs. James, at 7, was the quietest of the children, preferring books to horses, which Olivia encouraged despite some teasing from his siblings. And little Martha, at 2, was the baby of the family, spoiled and adored by everyone. On their anniversary, Ben surprised Olivia by taking her into town for dinner at the finest restaurant Miles City had to offer. Martha Johnson watched the children, shooing them away with instructions to enjoy themselves for once without worrying about anything. As they sat across from each other in the restaurant, both dressed in their finest clothes, Ben reached across the table to take Olivia's hand. "You remember the first night I brought you here?" he asked. "You were so exhausted you could barely stay upright on Clementine." "I remember thinking you must be an angel," Olivia said with a soft laugh. "No one that kind could be a real person." "I am very real," Ben said, bringing her hand to his lips. "And every day I wake up grateful that I found you sitting outside that livery stable. You have given me everything I never knew I wanted. You saved my life," Olivia said simply. "You and Samuel were everything to me, and then you gave me more children, a beautiful home, a life I never dreamed possible. I was so lost, Ben. I thought my story was over. But you showed me it was just beginning." They stayed in town that night, at the same hotel that had once refused Olivia shelter. The clerk who had turned her away was long gone, and the new owner was proud to host the foster family. As they lay together in the hotel bed, Olivia thought about the journey that had brought them here, from desperation to happiness, from strangers to soulmates. "What are you thinking about?" Ben asked, echoing a question he had asked countless times over the years. "I am thinking about doors," Olivia said. "About all the doors that closed in my face that day I came to Miles City. I used to think about them sometimes, feel angry or hurt. But now I realize that every closed door was leading me to the right one, to the door you opened, to the home you gave me." "My home is yours," Ben said, repeating the words he had spoken so many years ago. "It always has been, and it always will be." As the years continued to unfold, the foster family remained the heart of the community. Ben and Olivia's love story became something of a legend in Miles City, a reminder that kindness and compassion could change lives. They never forgot where they came from, and they made it their mission to help others in need, taking in several young ranch hands over the years who had nowhere else to go, making sure no one in their community went hungry if they could help it. Samuel eventually took over much of the day-to-day running of the ranch, working alongside his father and developing innovations that made them even more successful. When he was 20, he married a sweet girl named Elizabeth from a neighboring ranch, and they built a house on the Foster property, ensuring the family stayed close. Rose shocked everyone by becoming a schoolteacher, her wild energy channeled into educating the next generation of Montana children. She married at 23 to a banker from town, and while she moved into Miles City proper, she visited the ranch every week, unable to stay away from the horses for long. James pursued his love of learning, eventually becoming a lawyer, though he never forgot his roots and often took on cases for clients who could not afford to pay. He married late, at 30, to a widow with 2 children, and Ben and Olivia welcomed them into the family with open arms. Little Martha grew up as spirited as her namesake, and when she was 18, she announced her intention to become a veterinarian, one of the first women in Montana to pursue such a career. Ben and Olivia supported her completely, proud of her ambition and determination. Through it all, Ben and Olivia remained the center of it all, their love for each other never dimming but instead growing richer and deeper with time. They grew old together on the ranch, their faces weathering with age, their bodies slowing down, but their bond as strong as ever. On their 40th anniversary in 1915, their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a celebration. The original cabin was still standing, preserved as a reminder of where everything began, though the family now lived in a larger house built nearby. During the party, Samuel stood up to make a toast. "To my parents," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "My father gave my mother and me shelter when the whole world had turned its back on us. He gave us his name, his love, and his home. And my mother showed us all what strength and grace look like. They built this family on a foundation of love and kindness, and we are all better for it. Happy anniversary, Mama and Papa." As everyone raised their glasses, Olivia leaned into Ben, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders. They had seen so much together, experienced so much joy and occasional sorrow, had built something lasting and true. "You have any regrets?" Ben asked her quietly, his lips close to her ear. Olivia thought about it, really thought about it, considering all the paths her life could have taken. Then she looked around at their children and grandchildren, at the home they had built, at the man who had stood beside her through everything. "Not a single one," she said firmly. "Every moment, every struggle, every joy, it all led me to exactly where I was meant to be. It all led me to you." "And me to you," Ben said, kissing her temple. "Always and forever, Olivia. My home has been yours since the day I met you, and my heart has belonged to you just as long." As the sun set over the Montana landscape, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold, Ben and Olivia Foster sat surrounded by the family they had created, the legacy of their love. And if the wind carried whispers of a young widow who had been refused shelter everywhere, until a cowboy with a kind heart said those 4 simple words that changed everything, it was a story worth telling, worth remembering, worth celebrating. Because in the end, their story was proof that sometimes the worst moments in life can lead to the best ones, that kindness can change the world, and that real love, the kind that lasts, is built not on grand gestures but on daily choices to care for each other, to support each other, to choose each other again and again. The Foster Ranch continued to thrive for generations, and the story of how it all began was passed down from parent to child, a reminder that home is not just a place, but the people who love you, and that sometimes the greatest adventures begin when someone opens a door that everyone else has closed. Years later, when Ben passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 82, surrounded by his family. His last words were to Olivia, who sat beside him holding his hand. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for making my life complete." Olivia held his hand long after he was gone, remembering the young cowboy who had offered a desperate widow his home, his name, and his heart. She had lived a long life, longer than she had ever expected that desperate day in Miles City, and it had been filled with more love than she had ever thought possible. When it was her turn, 3 years later, to close her eyes for the last time, she did so peacefully, knowing she had lived well, loved deeply, and left behind a legacy that would endure. Her last thoughts were of Ben, of that first night when he had said, "My home is yours now," and of all the beautiful days that had followed. The children buried them side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, where they could watch over the land they had built together and the family they had created. On their shared headstone, Samuel had inscribed a simple epitaph that told their whole story: Benjamin Foster and Olivia Harper Foster. He opened his home to a stranger. She made it a home for them both. Together they built a legacy of love. And in Miles City, Montana, their story lived on, told and retold, a testament to the power of compassion, the strength of love, and the truth that sometimes all it takes to change a life is one person willing to say, "My home is yours now." The end.